Okay, so about, I think, a year ago, the Statutory Domestic Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Agency, CUAN, commenced. And we are delighted to introduce Dr. Stephanie O'Keefe, who was appointed as the first CEO of this agency in February 2024 to do the opening address of today's conference. Dr. O'Keefe previously worked in the HSE as a National Director of Health and Wellbeing and more recently the National Director of Operational Planning. She has over 20 years of experience working in the Irish Public Service across a number of organisations and was responsible for delivering Ireland's first whole-of-government population health strategy, Healthy Ireland, while working in the Department of Health. So I'm delighted to invite Dr. Stephanie O'Keefe to open today's event. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much to Diarmuid, the President of Dundalk Institute of Technology, to Adele, to Kathleen, and to all esteemed colleagues from various different sectors present here this morning. And thank you very much for the invitation to do some opening remarks. And well done to the RiVeR Project for one of the first conferences of the year. So fair play. They've been planning well ahead and getting in early and getting us on the road to be here. With gusto at the start of the year to address what are very significant, profound challenges that have devastating impacts in the lives of women, children and other victim survivors. And I don't know about you, but certainly for me, we've had obviously our weather warnings. I've had huge envy of all of the snow that has been everywhere else except in Dublin. But severe weather warnings, we've had, the long dark evenings, the sense of kind of hibernation, truly shocking kind of headlines over the holidays and before the holidays that continue to, I think, make people sit back and think about what's happening. Man sentenced to 6 years for coercive control and assault, man jailed for 8 years for rape and coercive control of wife, former CEO accused of coercive control and multiple assaults of wife, survivor of coercive control at hands of ex-Garda says law has to change to assist the victims. That's Nicola Hannay. I read her book recently. And it's great that you're focusing on that issue of coercive control. And in one respect, it's fantastic that we now have legislation, that wasn't there previously. That's really, really important so that somebody who is experiencing this crime can report it and criminal proceedings and investigations and so on can take place. But also that I think, for me, kind of coercive control is one of those areas where you can see new threats over time. So the threat of kind of technology and how technology enables what was previously domestic abuse, but domestic abuse 100% of the time outside of the home, no matter where you go. And it's one of the things I think that there's always been issues that require to be resolved, and you can see it in the first and the second and now the third strategy on domestic sexual and gender-based violence. But there are new and emerging threats, and one of the challenges that we will have collectively, CUAN can't do any of this work on its own, and in many respects we're building on the phenomenal work that has been done by the guards, by the sector, by people working in this area for decades, by the Minister, by government departments, the fact that there is a third strategy, the fact that there's been political leadership, and it looks like that we'll be able to bridge new political leadership given the commitments within the programme for government. We're working on the back of what is probably the strongest context that we've had to make discernible impacts in this area. But at the same time, we need to be really wise to new and emerging threats. And I wouldn't say the technology is new, but it certainly is emerging and it is developing. And it develops faster generally than the regulatory or the policy context can respond to. So it is something that we need to look at. So that's all a bit bleak, but also a bit positive. And I think for us as a new statutory agency, this is going to be our first year where we're fully working on the national strategy, zero tolerance, and our first year with almost our full team in place and still growing and developing. So our work really has been focusing for the last kind of week since we've come back on how can we manage the urgent but make sure that we're addressing the important, so that we build on the good work that's been done to create an agency that has the capability and the functionality to be there for the period of time that it is agreed that it will exist, which will certainly be beyond this strategy. There's a requirement and there's a commitment to a new strategy within the programme for government to try to build sustainable and lasting change on this agenda, which, as we all know within this room, is something that's very difficult to do. But we absolutely have fire in our bellies, and it's wonderful to be here with all of you and to be to see the kind of work like that's happening on the DkIT RiVeR Project, the innovation behind it, addressing a gap, addressing a need, and trying to make a difference on the learning and the education components of the national strategy. For those of you that don't know, CUAN is it's a relatively small agency, so it's under the agency of the Department of Justice. We had a ceiling of 35 for last year, 39 for this year, and we have functions, a range of statutory functions, but we fund the services providing supports and protections to people who've experienced rape, sexual assault, domestic violence, gender-based violence across the country. And we're responsible for developing national service development plans, and then we have a communications portfolio, we have a standards remit, and we have a remit around implementing the national strategy and coordinating across government departments. So we worked with our board to develop a corporate plan, and that was published in November, and that's a 3-year corporate plan for this year, next year and the year after. So it will straddle the two strategies. And there are 7 objectives within that corporate plan. I won't go through them all now, but maybe just to focus on one, which is a big one. They're all big, but this is a particularly big one. So all generations will be educated, informed and equipped to challenge and transform the social and cultural norms that contribute to domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. And to create lasting societal change, we really are determined to try to do everything in our kind of evidence box to be able to address this and to challenge the social and cultural norms that perpetuate DSGBV. And this really goes to the core of why we need a whole of society, whole of government strategy. And when we were developing the corporate plan, we were thinking, well, you have to go through your kind of, your vision and your kind of purpose, your mission statement, what are your values? And that's a really exciting time for us because, we've had the opportunity to say, well, we want to be a courageous state agency, we want to be able to call things out, we want to be able to challenge assumptions, we want to be creative, because if we just do what was done before, we'll just be really good at administrative tasks, but we won't really be very good at really pushing and changing and measuring and holding ourselves to account and holding the sector to account and holding our colleagues to account to say, look, are we really making progress on the things that we want to do? And it is actually a radical agenda. And a lot of the stuff that we will be doing will be innovative because the data underpinning the strategy, there are no KPIs, there were no key performance indicators in the implementation plans either. So there's a lot of new work for us to do to establish measures so that we can say, actually, are we making any progress? Can we say, hand on heart, that if we implement all of the actions in the national strategy with regard to prevention, that we will actually prevent? Or is there more that we need to do? And again, through research and a good, really strong research and data plan, we'll be able to look at that. And as a sector, we'll be able to work together to understand, what are, what they say within the health literature, what are the best buys. We know that this is a really wicked problem that goes to the core of kind of human and community kind of experience. And is exacerbated by various different kind of threats that I've mentioned. So we really do need to have, we need to leverage the fact that we have a whole of society, whole of government strategy to try to make those impacts. And that's why events like today are really important. It's really important to recognise people, developing training courses, coming on training courses, collaborating, working, TUSLA with the HSE, with the Guards, with local authorities, with local community groups, with NGOs, with volunteers, really understanding what's happening, and CUAN's role trying to, really identify, I suppose, what the evidence, what the data is telling us with regard to what it is that we need to do, and obviously playing a very significant leadership role in terms of working with other government departments and other state agencies to address some of the more challenging parts. And what I would mean by that is, I think there are parts of the third national strategy that were in the first national strategy, particularly on the prosecution pillar, whereby for people who have been, in the unfortunate, terrible position of experiencing these types of crimes, that their journey when they go to report it through the prosecution pillar can be very, very, very challenging. And some of the issues that are practical things that have been identified that can address and ameliorate that we still haven't really fully delivered on those. So I would like in time to be able to say, build proper kind of transparency and expectation management around actually, is the thing that we want to change impossible? Is it really, is that just not going to happen for another 10 years? Or what is the reason for that? Because as I say, if something has been in the first strategy and it's there in the third strategy, then there's something profoundly complex about making it happen. We need to be sitting on that and understanding it. So measurement and transparency is going to be an important part, I think, of additional kind of value that CUAN will be able to bring to the work that everybody is doing here. So when the strategy was published, there was an implementation plan published with it and a second implementation plan last year. And those implementation plans are pretty difficult to navigate. They're exceptionally long. They've got 140 actions. It's kind of hard to find yourself in it. But we're doing a piece of work whereby we're looking at both implementation plans, what we understand about where those actions are with regard to whether they're completed or whether they're still in progress. And we're doing a gap analysis compared to that and what was in the original strategy, so that we'll develop a final 2-year implementation plan with government departments and statutory agencies and working with the sector to really try to focus for 2 years on delivery, because the annual planning cycle is, comes up really, really quickly. You're basically doing the plan reporting. So a 2-year plan to really try to address the areas where we can start to either make the ground stronger for the hard work that we need to do, and also try to make progress in areas where there's already kind of good work, but we can strengthen it and deepen it. And within that implementation plan, we're really hoping that we'll be able to see evidence of strengthening that kind of partnership network, because there's actually an awful lot more work going on than in the implementation plans, I believe. Even the huge amount of work that's happening in the higher education sector through the HEA, and the funding that was provided out to all the universities and institutes to look at the whole area of consent. And we brought together a whole range of partners working in the area of consent. Sarah Hegarty, my colleague here, who heads up comms and campaigns in education, had a really good session talking about how we can be more strategic in terms of the work that is funded into the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre or NUIG Galway on active consent, and the Higher Education Authority work. But there's a whole load of formal programmes that are in place around consent, including one that we run with the Department of Education and the NCCA. We've got a great colleague doing some work with a team on supporting teacher training with the new education curriculum in secondary schools. So I think that another, of course, threat there is that all the good work that's happening in education, and there has been a significant policy shift in terms of education policy, SPHE, and addressing the realities of the lived experience of young people in Ireland. But maybe I'll finish on the point, I can see the little thingy going up there about leadership, because when we were talking about the vision for do we go with zero tolerance or do we go with kind of elimination, and we went with elimination because we felt nobody should really have to experience this. So can we really have a vision as an agency and a team kind of accommodating the fact that it's inevitable that it will happen? So we acknowledge within the corporate plan that the vision is very ambitious, but it is entirely possible to have a vision whereby education, where people go to learn or to train, can be completely free of kind of sexual violence, and that where people go to play sport, that can be completely free, that where you go to work, that where you go on public transport. So it's not impossible to have a pure vision for areas that should be safe in human lives. Obviously it's a different space when you start going into the private home. But we feel really strong about that, and that's going to take a significant amount of leadership and the building of a partnership network that extends beyond the existing partnership network. And I would suggest that that really it is pivotal that we see leadership kind of across those sectors to try to make an impact on these things. And if we bring that down to the likes of the reform in the education curricula, we need to see more expectation at local level. So you can have the policy, you can have the curriculum, you can have the training material for teachers, you can have the inspectorate reports, they can be published so they're child friendly so the children can read them. But unless at community level we see parents' expectations that the learning outcomes that are defined for our children to support them to navigate what's happening and all of those threats online, and people might have heard that piece on pornography on News Talk this morning when I was driving up, and I'll only go 1 minute over, but they forgot to say actually the piece, Sarah, that you published with SERP, which is the vast majority of online pornography now is violent. So it is hitting, it is biting, it is hair pulling, it is people vomiting as a result of the acts. It is 2 clicks away. Ciara Kelly went onto it this morning in 2 clicks. You'll have heard the news that news is because of they're introducing some protections in the UK that may be kind of face recognition. But these are the kind of things that are really happening, and we're trying to develop a curriculum to support people to understand what healthy relationships are like and so on and so forth. So there does need to be a community impetus that this education is critically important, and that can only come from community levers at local level. So that's something that we will need to work with the sector to try to address. It's not just the policy and the cross-government and the state and getting it right. It is very much what is happening at local level to create safe environments and to create really good programmes of work through the tools that we already have at local level to try to make an impact to young people trying to live their lives and have fun. And and I think anybody that works with young people, and I'm sure there's many people here that do, like, there's such pure joy. So we have all the negativity and so on, but there's real bright kind of hope for the future when you do work with young people and what they want. And when you speak to educators who talk to young people about these topics, they really say that it kind of comes down to the same thing. Like, they want to have really good, healthy, happy kind of relationships with one another, but there are kind of significant kind of challenges. So in terms of closing remarks, if anybody wants to know about us, we are at the moment we're at gov.ie/CUAN, and the team will be working on a new website this year, our Department of Justice colleagues. And I would just like to say, just to thank you to the team at RiVeR for just this idea of collaborative practice is critically important. And focusing on this particular issue today, obviously very important, because we're not the experts in coercive control within CUAN. The experts are the people that we fund and the people that we work with, and the guards and other people in the state who work in the area of child protection and what have you. So our learning comes from that. We'll develop more expertise over time, but we're never going to be the experts in that. And that's why we will be continuing on principles of co-design in our work. But thank you very much to the team, and thank you all for listening, and I look forward to engaging with you later.